the Non-Toxic Environment Show. This is your host, Andy Pace. Thanks again for joining us this week. I'm sure you are going to appreciate the conversation that I'm having with Brantley May with Enviro Health. Brantley and I have known each other for several years. We've worked together on projects, and he refers to a lot of the information I talk about. I certainly refer clients to Brantley and his services. Brantley is a building scientist. He's an indoor environmental professional. He's not just a mold inspector, but Brantley truly is somebody who can help with the built environment, the health of the occupants, and of course the energy efficiency and sustainability of the space. He's based down in Florida, but I know he works at a large area of the country. I'm having Brantley on the show today, not only to talk about him and what he does, of course, because he's quite interesting, and the projects he gets involved with are always quite interesting. But he's got a very interesting project of his own that he's working on, and he actually reached out to me recently wanting to know what to do next. And this is going to probably hit close to home for a lot of you. You know, I've been talking about the downsides of spray foam insulation for years now. I know the upsides. The spray foam insulation is something that is that the building industry is starting to really adopt because it heals a lot of the wounds of construction. You know, not so good lumber, poor building practices. Spray foam fills in all those little gaps to make sure that our homes are more energy efficient. Here are the downsides, though. It's not a safe product. I've always known it to be very dangerous. But what Brantley is experiencing, this is something that has happened to other clients before, but I think it's the first time it's actually happened to somebody who is an actual building scientist himself. And the absolute horrible situation in his own home. So I think you're going to really appreciate today's conversation. Hopefully you'll get something out of this. Hopefully you'll make a decision if you're in the middle of a project on your own to maybe go a different direction. And that's really the goal of this episode. So please listen and pass along to your family, friends, your building community members. Everybody needs to hear this one. Thank you. Brantley May with Enviro Health is joining us. And Brantley, I've known you for years. You and I have had conversations over the years, both over the phone and via email. But why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do and the type of projects you work on?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a building scientist. So I'm the evil part of the air quality industry. I'm trying to make everything more energy efficient. Right. But we do it in a way that tries to also improve air quality as well. And most of what I do these days is building forensics. And for those of you that don't know, building forensics is basically you have a crazy, weird problem in the house. Mostly mold or moisture related is what we deal with, or odor. Nobody can figure out what's going on. And we're there as the detectives to come out and investigate that problem, solve it, and then redesign the building so it doesn't happen again. And we also do some new home or remodel construction consulting too. Probably very similar to what you do. We just focus more on the building science, where I'm sure you probably focus more on the air quality stuff.
Yeah, we love working with building scientists because, you know, obviously we learn as well as our clients. But then we hope that we can also educate the building scientists on the healthier ways to do the energy efficient construction methods and HVAC design. As a matter of fact, I was just on a job site this morning prior to talking and working with the HVAC contractor, the plumber, electrician. We're doing a walkthrough, and you know, it's. I think for the last 30 years in construction, the conversation has been energy efficiency and how we're going to improve that. And, you know, we walk in and say, well, okay, that's great, but what we want is health of the occupant first. That should be the first and foremost decision maker on this project. And so we don't necessarily rock the boat at all, but we will change some materials and change some methods so that ultimately, you know, when you're living in the home, it's a healthier environment.
Yeah, totally. And that's actually funny that's how we met. Is I'm just like, okay, how do we do this a healthy way? I came across a customer that was chemically sensitive, but we were also trying to build a high performing place. And, I was running into problems during our inspection where people not only were reacting to the mold issues, but they were reacting to what the remediators we're using and all these other things that were happening in the house. Especially these houses that when you start building them pretty airtight, they start having ventilation issues. And we're sitting here trying to track down air quality issues. And I came across your podcast, years ago, reached out to you and started learning about all these non-toxic alternatives to what we were doing. And so ever since then, I really adjusted what building science is to me. Building science used to be performance, longevity, energy efficiency, and comfort, and a little bit of sustainability in that if you're interested in solar panels and, water collection and stuff, which is fun stuff I like to get into. But now at the top of that list, building science to me is air quality, right? Is the place healthy first, right? If we could prioritize that, okay, now let's make it energy efficient. Now let's make it high performing. Let's make the building last a long time. And if you do it right, they actually go pretty hand in hand. If you're keeping the moisture out, you're improving the air quality and you're improving the longevity of the building. So there's lots of ways that those actually solve problems. And it's funny because when we go in and do building forensics for air quality issues, what we find is if you do all of these things, your house is now more energy efficient too. If you solve all these air quality problems, like, putting insulation there where condensation was occurring, fixing your air conditioner issue where you were getting duct leakage and all these things that were causing these problems, you are now having a more energy efficient house. So if you do it right, they can actually go hand in hand. But if you don't know about the air quality thing and you just try to make the building better insulated, tighter, bigger range hood and all these things, you're going to start causing air quality issues. So there's always that balance for sure.
Yeah, I love that way of describing it, Brantley, because we used to say, what good is saving the environment if we're still poisoning the occupants? and so, we'd be talking to the building science community, and it was all about, again, energy efficiency, high performance of the building materials. And we'd say, yeah, but you realize that people have to live in these spaces. And so how does that change the equation? And the way you're looking at it now is, well, if we can improve the indoor air quality, improve the quality of life for the occupant through the use of better materials and better methods, ultimately it is a higher performing structure. And it's kind of like the question I get quite often, which is it more expensive to build healthy? And my answer is, well, if you compare quality level to quality level, apples to apples, it's no more expensive. It's the same price. And so if you are improving the health of the occupant, most often times you're also improving the performance of the home. You mentioned moisture. Not only is moisture a problem with the possibility of mold growth or bacterial growth, but it also increases the potential for chemical off-gassing. As moisture is coming off the surface, it'll carry with it the chemical footprint of where it was. So we've found that by reducing overall moisture levels in homes, we're also reducing the overall chemical off-gassing.
Yeah, that's really interesting, especially when you have, materials in the house that are doused with chemicals to begin with, like the particle board and stuff that does get wet. We see increases in formaldehyde and stuff from water damage buildings as well. So we actually see that in the field all the time when we're doing the building forensic stuff. And you're right, the ROA, if you do quality to quality, a lot of times it's not about, the materials that you're using that changes it. A lot of it's the methodology too. How are you putting them in? How are you installing it? And are you doing it smart? And do you know what to do or know what not to do? And if you actually look, ROI, return on investment, is a weird way to look at something, saving money and how you're doing something, because there's all these little nuances, right? Is it more expensive to do it the right way? It can be in certain situations if you only take into dollar per dollar. But I'm dealing with houses where we're ripping off the sheathing and we're replacing the cladding because of a moisture issue, and then they're remediating the house. This is a $100,000 project. If you spent the extra $15,000 when you built the house to do it right, you would have saved money, And it's like, well, going out and fixing, an unvented attic issue, right? We see that's one of the biggest things I do is spray foam attics and humidity issues down here in Florida. Deal with hot, humid climate issues all the time. And we're like, okay, when we're going to do it, we're going to put everything back. We're going to do this type of HVAC system. We're going to do this type of dehumidification. We're going to do this type of vented attic or unvented attic. And Like, oh my gosh, okay, that's going to cost us like $15,000 more. It's expensive. It's like, well, your remediation just cost you 40.
Mm-hmm.
So this is here to not only give you comfort and health, which you can't put a price on, but it's actually there to also solve problems in the future that are going to cost you more money.
Right. Of course, this could be an entirely separate conversation that we bring in maybe some of the finance people, but we also have to convince those who are um, assessing the home values for um, loans for the homes
Hmm.
that you know when somebody wants that extra $15,000 or $20,000 in the build cost in order to make these improvements, the banks have to be willing to allow for that, and they don't right now. It's
Hmm.
like if you want a more of more of an exotic heating ventilation system, might cost another $10,000-$15,000 for the project. Something like a heat pump system, or even a um, something more like a geothermal. The bank is going to say, well, it costs the same. It costs $15,000-$20,000 less to use a traditional system. That's the value we're going to give you for your loan.
Yeah.
And so the same is true with building materials themselves. I can justify adding $10,000 to the cost of a new build to say that 20 years down the road, you're not going to be dealing with these issues, but the banks just won't give you the value for them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to put a price on that type of stuff because how do you put a price on this place has better air quality?
Right.
It's an invaluable thing. And,
Mhm.
I have an acquaintance that put together a long time ago the Energy Star program for houses,
Mhm.
which is awesome. And then he was trying to do is say, well, Energy Star is great, but how do we also implement, and Energy Star actually started causing issues with people with air quality, right? So if you look at any time you bring in fresh air from outside, it's an energy penalty,
Sure.
right? You can make the place as airtight as possible, as insulated as possible. Oh, now I got to put a freaking hole in the wall so I can bring in fresh air for these stupid occupants, you know?
Right.
And now I'm bringing in all that heat and that humidity or that cold if I'm in the north. And so it's an energy penalty, and a lot of people want that Energy Star plaque, and so they try to make it as energy efficient as possible. So this guy that created the system, he's like, well, let me make a program, and I think he called it Indoor Air Plus,
Hmm.
and it basically is based on the Energy Star program, but it's a certification that the house can get for air quality as well. And I think things like that are a great step towards how do we actually tangibly put like a value on this house because it does have better air quality. Because if you don't, I mean, look, I just purchased the house I'm in right now, and I'm going to be spending a lot of money on improving it with air quality things. And I'm not going to get that ROI is not coming back to me. I'm not making my money back on this for sure because nobody that comes in the house is really going to appreciate it. And you think someone coming in to assess the value of the home is going to understand what I did with the air exchange systems and are they going to know that I put in marmoleum in the floors versus regular flooring? They're not going to know that stuff, right? And so, yeah, it's definitely going to cause me some financial damage. But at the end of the day, it's not about that. And that's one of the things that I learned early on in the building science community too. Sometimes we put really expensive, cool things in our house to make it high performing and more comfortable because we like it and it gives us a better place to live, not necessarily because it's increasing the value of the home.
That's true. That's true. I mean, you have to look at it as quality of life,
Right.
and the question always comes up: well, if I sell the house within 5 years, will I get that value back? Well, you can't really look at it that way. You have to look
Yeah.
at the holistic approach, which is if you are improving air quality, you're improving your sleep because air quality is better. The house just
Hmm.
feels better to occupy. You might be
Hmm.
decreasing healthcare costs. You might be
Yeah.
improving your production at work and improving your mental acuity. There's a lot of upsides that don't have tangible or you can't put a value to those improvements,
Yeah.
and you hope that as consumers become a bit more savvy about this down the road, maybe they will recognize this. And once again, I'll go back to quality level to quality level. If all these improvements are being done at with great care, they're being done at a high level, so it has value from a quality level. Then homeowners will appreciate that. instead of just, going to the biggest big box store you can find, get the least expensive flooring. No, you went and got marmoleum, which is a more expensive material, but it's going to last for 50 years. And so hopefully consumers, as they become more educated, will start to recognize those things. And so you kind of went into that subject a bit. So let's kind of peel the layer on this one. So Brantley reached out to me, what was that, last week, I believe, and had some questions about a project you were working on involving spray foam insulation. And I learned in the call that it wasn't just a project, it was your house. And, I immediately said, we should be recording this conversation. This is, unfortunate, a very unfortunate situation, but also extremely educational. And I hope that everybody listening will take notes on this one, because this is the unintended consequence of trying to do the right thing. And so give us a little history here. What are we working with, Brantley?
Yeah, like I said, I just bought a house, and a project is an understatement. I'll call it a nightmare project because it's always worse when it involves your own health and your own family and all these other things. It really puts things in perspective. So, I just bought this house, and I'm like, okay, well, I know I don't want to do a vented attic. It's an old house from the 70s and nasty insulation up there. There's a lot of air leakage happening. We already found mold issues that we remediated before moving in. Luckily, we were able to keep our last house for months while we were doing things to this house, and we still have a lot to do. But in the attic, I said, you know what? I'm a building science guy. I'm gonna switch this to an unvented attic. That way, all my ductwork that's in there is in a conditioned space. It's not sweating. It's not hot anymore. All those holes and penetrations in the ceiling aren't allowing that hot, humid Florida air to come in. This is all good. Well, what's the best product when I'm retrofitting an old attic? Spray foam. We're going to do spray foam on the roof deck and enclose the attic. And, I know myself the risks of spray foam. I know that if it doesn't cure properly, you're going to have problems. And I know if you don't pick the right product, you're going to have problems. If you don't pick the right installer, you can have problems. I know that, it's harder to find roof leaks and all these other things, right? And I assume those risks thinking, you know what, if I'm really controlling this situation, I get my 3 roof inspections and I make sure they're using the right product, I get the right installer that I trust, and all these things line up, I should be fine. So I got this installer coming in. He did the spray foam. Spray foam looks amazing. I come in the project, I check on it in about 3 days, and my house smells to high heaven. And I'm like, oh God, that's not normal. I've been on projects with spray foam. It's like, this is 3 days. This is a while. And mind you, day 2, I came in, of course, masked up so I didn't smell anything. I had my what's called a PAPR on. It's a respirator that does chemicals and stuff. And I set up my blower door. Those of you that don't know, a blower door basically is a big giant fan that sucks the air out of the house, depressurizes it. And it's a great way to ventilate a place. So I ran that blower door for like half a day to ventilate the house 2 days after the spray foam. I came in the next day, smelled to high heaven. I was like, well, that can't be accumulation because I just vented it. This has to be a continual source producing this smell. And so kind of freaked me out a little bit. I called my installer. He came out and looked at it. He was like, oh yeah, it does smell pretty bad in here. But this product's been smelling like that. I think it's just normal. I said, this ain't normal, man. All right. So flash forward a week, I go in and the house smells the exact same. And I'm like, that is not good, right? If spray foam cures properly, it should be fairly inert and hard to smell within a few days, assuming that you have pretty good ventilation. So I'm thinking something's really wrong here. Well, we get the installer, the techs involved, and the tech said everything went fine. We got the manufacturer involved. Manufacturer, oh, we can't be out there, for another few weeks. Why don't you have the installer send us a sample? All right. So we sent them a sample, and which is basically you just go up and you grab a piece of foam out of the roof deck and you send it to the manufacturer. Manufacturer takes weeks to review it. And here my house is just still sitting here. And they're like, yeah, everything came back great. And they gave me this report. And Andy, you know what the report said? It said, sample name, spray foam, pass or fail, pass. That's all I get. Okay. I'm like, pass what?
Pass what? Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, and are they even checking I mean, what are those manufacturers doing when they're even doing that test?
Well, they're testing to see if it actually cured,
Right.
and it expanded properly. It cured, but I mean, because that cures in what 60, 90 seconds or something like that. That's what they
Exactly. Yeah.
deem to be a full cure.
Yeah. And
But
so it's like, what are you checking, and what is it pass or fail on? I was expecting to see, like, I use enthalpy analytical for my own work, and they give you an actual compound list, and they're able to tell you, compound by compound what they're seeing in there per nanogram per liter. It's like an incredibly thorough an analysis. And so I get this pass or fail. I'm like, what is it passing or failing? They're like, oh, it's just passing or failing our quality standards. Like,
okay.
I don't know what your standards are.
Sure.
So I kind of left with nothing. The other thing too is sampling can be very misleading. They take, a half a square foot out of the ceiling. I got 3 attics in here, man. Is that a good a data set of what exactly is going on? If he went a foot to the left, would it have been really bad? So how deep he didn't really bore in either. He just took surface level. So there's all these things. I'm like, I don't need a test to know my house smells like crap right now, So, I kept fighting him on it and stuff. And at the end of the day, I told the installer, like, we got to remove this, and the manufacturers didn't want us to remove it until we actually understood what was going on. I think they didn't want to be liable for the bill. And I was like, well, not really, up to you. It's my house, right? So flash forward to them saying, we're going to send someone out. We're going to send one of our guys out, product specialist, and he's going to look at it himself. So they flew someone to the house to take a look at it, but it took a month for them to get here.
Oh boy.
So they finally came out, and he's like, oh yeah, it does smell weird up here. Like, okay, thanks for coming out to tell me that. Exactly. So he's like, well, we're going to take a sample too. Now the sample he took, as soon as you broke it open, you can smell. It had this crazy, nasty, chemical, fishy odor to it. And they said, all right, we're going to send this off to the lab. We're going to figure out what's going on for you guys. We don't know what's happening. And they were kind of at a standstill. And quite honest, we're still kind of at a standstill of who exactly caused it. Was it the installer? Was it the manufacturer's product? Well, that sample was gone for another month. And we kept asking about it. And finally, and they were ghosting and just not replying to the installer, which they have a good relationship. They usually talk often. So we found this to be kind of odd. Finally got a hold of them, and they said, we lost the product. It's like, so did you lose it, or did you, quote, lose it, right? Mm-hmm. So I said, I'm just gonna do what they've been telling me not to do and do my own test. Because I've been telling them, I was like, I'll just send off my own sample. And I've been super, super friendly this whole time. I'm like, hey, let's figure this out. This is perfect house to get it done on because I can help you. Figure out what's going on with the product or your install. Well, I ended up sending it to the lab and get the results back. And the results are obviously showing that there's a problem. There's a type of compound. It's kind of a mouthful. It's called Biz2 dimethylamino ethyl ether. And it's kind of hard. It's like a tongue twister. But basically what that is it's part of the spray foam that helps it cure faster. So they want it to cure as fast as possible as they're making these passes with the foam. And so this is what's called a catalyst that basically increases the speed that it cures. And I'm seeing this floating around in the air with my air sample that we took and sent to the lab. This is not something that should be floating around in the air. The way that the catalyst works is they have a perfect amount. That way it mixes and reacts with the rest of the stuff in the spray foam. So it uses it all up essentially. Well, obviously not all of it was used up, and it's off-gassing off of the foam. So there's only a few things that can really happen if you have more of this catalyst. Either A, the manufacturer put too much in it, so the ratios aren't right. And so the way spray foam works, if you guys have never seen a setup, they have a type A canister and a type B canister. And those two products will go into a tube and mix at the nozzle of the little gun that they're using the foam with. And so they both come out of the tip of the gun, and as soon as they boom hit, they'll react and they'll cause the spray foam reaction. And so you're supposed to be a 1-to-1 ratio, right? With type A and type B, they mix perfectly. Well, if you put too much of this catalyst in, there's nothing to react with, and it's just left over. So either A, they put too much in the manufacturing process, or B, The spray foam installer, something was going on with them. They didn't use the right ratios. Could have been something really silly, like one of the nozzles was clogged and they were getting a little less out of one. I mean, who knows, right? But I try to be as careful as possible. I actually went out there and looked on the truck, made sure everything was going right, made sure my technician was the best technician in the company, apparently, right? And the installer, he knows whose house he was he was spraying at, right? So he was the owner was very critical with everybody on how everything was going. And here we are 9 months later now in this house. And luckily, I'm preventing it from coming into the house based on like some things that I did up there with negative pressure and stuff. But if you walk in the attic right now, 9 months later, you smell it. It smacks you in the face. Yeah.
Mm.
So it's been a nightmare. And now we're this week they're coming out to remove a section of it to try to get a sense of how hard it's going to be, what they're going to do, what they're going to have to do.
Right.
And I mean, you know as well as I do, this stuff is not fun to take out, and you're not going to be able to take it out 100%. So yeah, it's a nightmare working with this, and it's crazy that it's happening to my own house. So now, ever since then, you know, this started 6-7 months ago. I am not using spray foam on my jobs. You know, I'm actually, anytime we're running to an issue where we do have to retrofit or we have to air seal a situation, I'm like, no, thank you. I'd always assume the risk because the risk appeared to be small. I had been doing this for years. I'd never really dealt with this personally. But after digging into it a little bit more, I realized, okay, this is actually happening just at a smaller degree that I never really observed, right? And so it's changing a lot of the way that I'm, you know, helping with these. I'm actually doing consulting down south right now with 2 different houses, and we're doing unvented attics, and we're finding ways to make these enclosed condition attics with no spray foam. And it's working out really well. And actually what I've started to learn is the risks are much lower, not just because of the spray foam curing, but also all these other risks of spray foam. It's actually being done really well. And it's really shifted my mindset on how to do this. So it's been a crazy experience.
Yeah, I'm really sorry to hear what's happening on your home, and I'm sorry you have to go through that. On the other hand, I'm glad it happened to somebody with your level of knowledge, your level of experience, because you can first of all imagine just the average homeowner this is happening to. They wouldn't have the ability to speak with the manufacturer and the crews the ways you can, and to get them to understand what's happening in your house. I've had numerous clients over the years run into the exact same situation, and they feel like they have no voice whatsoever. The common response is, "Well, this is just the way it is. You know, you'll have to just live with it." And although, as I told you on the phone last week, I've had clients who had to do like ice blasting in order to get rid of all the little particles that's out of the wood because they can't tolerate the chemical off gassing. Now, does this happen in every home that gets spray foam insulated? No, it doesn't happen at the extent it happens for you. It happens at a very, very low level. You know, traditional chemical off gassing, I think most people assume that off gassing and curing are the same thing. So when I talked about how spray foam cures in 60 to 90 seconds, that chemical cure process, when the foam expands and all of the expansion has occurred, it's in its final state. It's not going to get any thicker, any harder. Once that stops, off gassing begins. And typically for things like spray foam, caulking materials, paints and finishes, your off gassing will continue anywhere from 3 to 5 years after the full cure. In your situation, because of whatever that recipe was, whether it's too much Part B, maybe the lifts of foam were put on too quick to one another, maybe it was a temperature humidity issue, whatever the case is, it's that off gassing is happening for a much longer time period because that catalyst never actually did react and become part of that finished foam. It's just still stuck in there, and without doing anything with it, it's going to last at least another 3 to 5 years, if not longer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, doing air quality tests and stuff before trying to find spray foam issues, I was looking for the stuff in the safety data sheet. And so I've learned a lot from this. And for example, you go up and you run spray foam, you run air samples to say, hey, did this cure properly? And what I'm looking for is what the safety data sheet said the fire retardant was, what the safety data sheet said this was in. But two problems with that. One, do you know how many things in a safety data sheet says proprietary? Most of it.
Yep.
So you don't know what's what. The second thing is, if you're looking for fire retardants, you might not find them because what Sarah taught me over at Enthalpy Analytical is a lot of the times it's broken down. Yes. It's not the fire retardant anymore. It actually breaks down into other things.
Correct.
And these are the types of things that we actually see during the breakdown. So you need to make sure if you are checking for these things that you have an air quality specialist that's really solid with their chemistry and this stuff, because I've made this mistake in the past where I look at reports and I say I don't see anything in the safety data sheet, and it's not that simple, right? And it's the same thing with one thing that we do worry about a lot, especially in building science, is radon. All right, because we don't want to pull radon in from outdoor sources. Well, radon is one of those breakdowns. If I look at radon, it started as uranium, and then it goes to thorium, and then it goes to radium, and then it goes to radon. So it's these breakdowns. Does that make radon any less harmful? No. Radon is very harmful. It's one of the leading causes of lung cancer. And so, but if I was only looking for uranium, the starting point, I would have a very hard time finding any sort of issues with the house. Yet I'm telling people it's perfectly fine.
Right. Well, then also when you're looking at those safety data sheets, understand that not only are a lot of those ingredients part of a proprietary blend, but also, by law, they only have to list ingredients that make up more than 1% of the volume.
Right.
So you could actually have 15 different chemicals in any material that by themselves are undetectable and don't have to be listed. But as the product starts to cure, it starts to create formaldehyde, create other chemical compounds. Mm-hmm. These are called precursors or donors. And so we see this a lot in the paint and coatings industry. The manufacturer can say, our products are formaldehyde free. Look at our SDS sheet. There's no formaldehyde in it. Well, if you get 10 to 12 different formaldehyde precursors getting together while the product starts to cure, it'll create formaldehyde. And so a safety data sheet is not there to give a homeowner any indication as to how healthy or unhealthy a product is. It's to help first responders and firefighters and highway, if there's a spill on a highway, how do you protect yourself? How do you gear up for it? What do you do if there's a fire with this material in a liquid state? In a home, a safety data sheet is almost irrelevant because of everything that can be hidden, what they don't have to tell you. So again, it does require to do more in-depth testing of air quality, and it also helps, if you had before and after. And so that sometimes, if you were to go back to the manufacturer to say, here's what I'm finding in the air in my house, they're going to say, well, what's to say it didn't come from something else, or from, maybe it was there before you bought the house. And so I'll always tell my clients, when you buy a home and you intend on remodeling it, do an air quality test first. It's a baseline. We kind of know what we're dealing with. And then as you do projects, if something comes up where it's questionable and you're having concerns about what is being released, then we can do another test and then now look at those two tests side by side to see what actually happened.
Yeah, that's a great point. Having some sort of baseline is really important, especially because some of these chemicals, most of these chemicals are very common. If you see toluene, benzene, formaldehyde, Texanol, these, they could potentially be in 50 different products. And this is where a lot of people are asking me after we get these lab results back, hey, what do you think about, or where do you think that this, where do you think this benzene's coming from? It's like, well, I can send you a list, but you're not going to be able to finish it by the end of the week. You know what I mean? Right. Yeah, it's tough. And so that's a great call out. Luckily with this Biz 2, this catalyst, you don't see it in houses.
Correct.
Very uncommon. So I got very lucky here in a sense that I can actually point to them. Now they're kind of Spider-Man meme pointing the finger at each other, saying like, well, it was you, no, it was you. But the installer that actually did my house, he told me, he's like, you know what's crazy that you're telling me about this catalyst? They've been calling me the last few months saying, hey guys, good news, we're adding more catalyst, we're adding more catalyst. Because they are just looking at the fact that it's going to increase the curing time, which is what the installers love, right? They're not looking at the fact that there's a bunch of excess in this product, and where is it going to go? Oh, it's going to go into my lungs. That's cool. What are you going to do about it, right? So now we're kind of in this situation where I'm trying to be helpful but firm. Like, hey, let me help you. Let me look into this. Let me see what we can do. If you guys want me to connect you with the lab that I use, they're very good on this stuff. Do you want me to do more testing on your product? I'm more than happy to do that, just to make sure that it's not yours. I don't even care about my house at this point when it comes to solving your problem. I just want to make sure that your product works well, because I'm not going to be able to stop the spray foam industry, but I can maybe help your product actually be better, right? So it's a very interesting situation that I've found myself in with these manufacturers. And the hardest part to me, Andy, is that I want to help these guys, but I don't think that they want to be helped.
No.
I'm trying to help them solve problems that they may potentially have in their product, and they're like, well, this has never happened to us, so we're fine.
Yeah. So the cynic in me tells me that, this will be strung along to a point where it's not going to go any further, because the reason why they add more catalyst is to make sure that it cures under not so good scenarios. Too cold outside, too humid, the woods might be a little wet, but they want to make sure that the product cures. They want to make sure that it's, and I hate to say it this way, but it kind of dumbs down the application process,
right? Yeah.
So that you could have maybe less trained, less educated installers putting it on, and it still works.
Yeah, there's like a higher margin of error, right?
Right. They want to make the product goof-proof, and so that decision comes from a level so high up. It's all about the liability for the company,
right?
And I don't think that they're not gonna reformulate their product because of a one-off situation. They would reformulate the product because they believe that as a corporation, they're losing profits because of contractors that are complaining that the product isn't curing fast enough, or it's too difficult to apply. Ultimately, they don't care. And I say this kind of a blanket statement. They don't care about the health of the occupant because they don't have to.
Yeah. Well, what do you think about this, Andy? VOC, low VOC spray foam, green spray foam. Have you seen those?
Oh yeah, I have. And they're loaded with flame retardants.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing. I actually started recommending a spray foam a few years back when I found one. I think Matt Reisinger even had his air quality inspector on site when it was being used. But that was just it. While it was being used, he was doing air quality tests, saying, "Oh, this stuff is great. I'm not getting any readings on my VOC meter or my formaldehyde meter." But there was never any follow up to that. What happened a month later, 3 months later? What other testing could have been done, like with fire retardants? I've got a client right now who is in the process of putting together a class action lawsuit because of dozens and dozens of homes in her area using this brand of spray foam, and they all have fire retardants, 100 times more than just the healthy limit. And the manufacturer claims that there are no fire retardants in their product. Okay,
right.
So this is one of those situations we just talked about. They may not put a chemical in the product that is deemed a fire retardant, but they may have precursors in it that'll actually create that as the product cures. And technically, they can say, we don't use fire retardants.
Yeah.
And so I think this is going to become a bigger issue across the board. We have to look back at how do we build homes and remodel homes before plastics industry developed spray foam.
Yeah.
Let's use some older techniques, some better techniques. It might mean that we've got to lose some headroom in your house. You may have to make your make the roof deck a little bit thicker so that you can accommodate more insulation. But if it's designed properly, it's designed with this in mind, we wouldn't have to rely on spray foam as the only choice.
100%. And you've mentioned this before, and I just experienced this with a house down in Sanibel. And, I'm talking to the guy about making an unvented attic with rock wool, which is a mineral wool insulation. And it's naturally flame retardant because it's literally like lava rock, and it works really well. And it's a pretty good insulator, and it's a pretty good sound barrier. So this is a great product. But the guy that wanted to help me with the unvented attic, the contractor, he's like, well, how are we gonna make it airtight without spray foam? And I'm like, well, we've been building attics for a long time, and I don't think I don't think the people in the 18th century had spray foam. So I think they were able to figure it out. And the answer is, you just take your time and you build the building with that in mind, right? What we're doing in this situation is we're making sure the soffits are closed, that it's everything is mechanically fastened, meaning like wood on wood is being one of the biggest methods, right? You put everything wood on wood, you make sure it's airtight, and you can caulk from the outside, right? Anything that we caulk from the inside is usually we use a AFM caulk, or they even have an industrial caulk that we'll use. But everything outside, we're using things that are good for the sun, that can blast on it forever, good paints, and all these things. You're going to actually seal the building really, really well if you construct it knowing that it's going to be airtight. You don't need spray foam. At that point, once it's air sealed and airtight based on the construction methods, then all you have to worry about is insulating. And insulating, you could insulate with anything. Right. You can insulate with actual wool if you wanted to. And so there's lots of great methods that can and will hopefully replace spray foam down the line. But unfortunately, when you have spray foam being essentially a manufacturing facility at your house, I don't know how they're going to make that product safe from off-gassing.
Right. I don't either. And I think the industry has adopted spray foam as a crutch, if you ask me. It's if we use spray foam in these exterior cavity walls, it's going to heal some of the wounds of framing. Lumber that isn't true, wood-to-wood connections that aren't so good, maybe labor that just isn't as skilled as it used to be. Mm-hmm. Homes are getting built faster, cheaper, is tried to maximize profit margins for everybody involved. And so spray foam has become this wonderful elixir to heal all those wounds of construction. But again, to what end? And to how's this going to affect the occupant? And so we need to go back to the way homes used to be built. Now, understand that the way homes used to be built, there was a lot of fresh air, just because there was, natural ventilation. And so we have to look at it maybe from a different perspective. Do homes need to be as energy efficient as they are right now? Mm-hmm. Are we really saving enough in energy costs in our monthly energy bills to make it worth the potential that we're living in a toxic box? And so these are the questions that my clients always have, and we walk through on a job-to-job basis, making sure that we kind of walk that fine line between as healthy as possible while maintaining a good deal of energy efficiency. But at some point, you have to decide what's more important. Is it the health of me and my family, or is it the health of the environment from a standpoint of I'm saving the planet because I'm using spray foam instead of fiberglass insulation? I think that if we build homes of better quality to design the test of time and to be healthy for the occupants, that ultimately is more sustainable.
100%. And that's how we got to this point. When you're talking about us having to utilize things like spray foam and used to build with better quality materials, used to build looser, this is the perfect storm that's caused air quality problems and it's things like mold. 50 years ago, we were actually building out of real wood, and buildings were not very energy efficient, right? They were kind of loose and leaky, and we used to have something called balloon framing, where the framing was kind of all connected to each other, and there's a lot of air exchange in the walls. Whenever you got water in an old wall in a 1900s home, early 1900s home, that water did not cause mold like it causes today. And one of the reasons why is in order for water to dry, it requires energy. And so when you have an energy transfer, that liquid water goes into a gas because it's evaporating because of that heat, that energy. Well, what do you think is going to happen when you make your wall more energy efficient and you stuff it with insulation? When that wall gets wet, is there any energy transfer in that wall that's actually drying that material? The answer is no. And so that water sits as a liquid. And by the way, it's not sitting on a liquid on a log anymore. It's sitting on particle board. And particle board and logs do not have what's called the same hygric buoyance capacity or hygric buffer capacity, meaning that it doesn't absorb and hold the same amount of moisture. You know, something like a log we used to build boats out of and sail across the frickin' ocean. Mm-hmm. Try doing that with particle board. See how far you get. Right. You know what I mean? And so what's going to happen is now you're dealing with a wall that's super energy efficient, that has particle board in it, which swells and molds very easily, and you start dealing with rot. All the while, inside the house, people are living in a sardine can because of how energy efficient and airtight it is. And now you're dealing with all these other impacts of CO2 increasing, which is really a proxy telling you that all these other things are also increasing, like VOCs and particulates. And not to mention, I'm heavy on the HVAC side. You know, the biggest thing that we see here, Andy, is particle counts in the winter increase. And the reason for that, most houses, most average Americans, the only filtration that they get in their house is their air conditioner. Well, in part load season, when it's 70 degrees outside here in Florida in autumn and winter, and it's 70 degrees in your house, how often do you think your air conditioner is running? Right. Almost never. And so all those internal loads of these particles are just increasing and increasing and increasing. And so now you're dealing with allergens, both particulate and chemical. And then you're dealing with these moldy houses that can be surrounded by mold. It's like, oh my God, where do we end? And so as a building scientist, my job is all about control, right? Let's control the environment. So I want the most energy efficient house. I don't think personally, and this is a hot take, I don't think there's such thing as a building that's too tight. But what you do want is you want to build it as tight as possible. You want to keep everything out and then control how it comes in. So if you have a really airtight house, a really energy efficient house, but you're keeping the moisture out with good building practices and you have great ventilation, so you're bringing the fresh air in instead of it being uncontrolled fresh air, meaning coming in through windows or your crawl space or your attic. That's not where you want your air ventilating from. And if you control it, now we can have a really energy efficient, really high performing house where fresh air is going through a dehumidifier, in our case in Florida, which means it's being filtered once on the dehumidifier. It's getting dried. It's being sent to the air conditioner. It's getting filtered again. It's getting cooled and dried again. Then it's getting distributed through the house. Now we're talking, right? And so it's all about that control, but we haven't caught up there yet. We're just not quite there where these builders understand this stuff. And so what it results in is still going along with the energy crisis that happened in the 70s, building tighter and tighter and more energy efficient, codes changing, making it tighter. And the codes are moving rapidly with energy efficiency, but air quality is lagging behind by like 10, 15 years. And it's just not catching up. So now you have this window where people are just getting sick. And not to go on this tangent, but air quality consultants don't even understand this. Ventilation is one of the last things that a mold inspector or that an air quality guy really look at in residential buildings. And it's one of the most fundamental things that you need to start looking at when you're dealing with investigating any house that's from especially 2020 and beyond, when we started building way more energy efficient, way tighter. Why aren't we looking at ventilation? I had a guy call me up, a buddy of mine that took one of our classes, and he said, I didn't see any sources of VOCs in this house, but my enthalpy test, which he's so new to, he just did this VOC test. My VOC tests are telling me that there's high VOCs in here. And if you look at the result, you know, Andy, how they tell you how many total VOCs are in there? Sure. And then what enthalpy will do is they'll give you the most significant VOCs that they saw. If you get one of the more affordable tests, it'll give you like 10, 15 of the most significant. Well, they only had a few there, but realistically, there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, likely thousands of chemicals in that house that were making up that total VOC number. Sure. And he was like, where's the source? And I said, well, you ever consider that maybe there's no one particular source? Sometimes it's not even like if you see cleaners in there, it's not like they're cleaning a lot. What it means is it's not leaving, right? It's just building and building and building. And so I said, why don't you, the house was just built. Why don't you go get the blower door score and tell me what that is? And so he was able to get the blower door score. And just for you guys that don't know these scores, it's a score of how airtight the house is. In Florida, if you're more than 7 air changes per hour in a blower door score, you fail. It's the house is too leaky. You don't meet energy efficiency codes, and they want you to be a little bit tighter. If you're below 3 air changes per hour, you require by code mechanical ventilation. So you're supposed to bring in fresh air. So that 3 to 7 windows, really the main thing. And then when you get below that, you have a pretty airtight house, but you need to have fresh air. Well, this house was almost at 1, and it had no fresh air. So the HVAC guys and the contractor, they're not familiar with that code that needs to be done, and they just were sitting in a sardine can full of fresh new chemicals that were all off-gassing in a 1-year-old home.
Yep.
So it has to be done from both perspectives. It has to be done from the people that are building, and it has to be done from the people that are inspecting these symptoms. When people call you and say, "I'm sick and I don't know why."
The average new home built today has anywhere between 8 to 10,000 chemicals in the air right after construction, and a lot of that will dissipate eventually, break down, but a lot of it doesn't. It accumulates, and so to your point earlier, the healthiest home is a completely hermetically sealed box that you have mechanical ventilation bringing you fresh air, because then you can control the particulate count of the air coming in. You can control the humidity. That would be the healthiest home. Now, homes built today are built in this in-between land between being hermetically sealed and being breathable. And it's either or. You either have to build a home that is completely airtight or as low as possible and bring in mechanical ventilation, or you build a home on the opposite side of the spectrum of completely breathable wall assemblies. And so the problem we have is that we're stuck in between. The building industry across the country is in that between land, and that's when you run into problems. And so it does require the use of different materials. We are starting to advocate more breathable paints, mineral paints, so that it'll allow vapor to come into the home. We are using smart membranes in lieu of your typical 4 mil poly sheets in those parts of the country where you do that for energy code. It's all about understanding that moisture is going to get into the home. It's going to get into the cavity wall. So how do you allow it to come out without it causing problems? Until we have solved the problem of building a completely airtight home, which, that's going to require more adoption of insulated concrete forms and other methods of construction that will be better for that. But traditional stick frame homes is always going to be that in-between land. So we have to incorporate materials and methods that account for that and allow for that moisture to come out, so we don't run into a mold problem down the road.
Yeah. Well, you know what the worst part is? We used to do that. We used to build with like if you go look at these old beautiful buildings and you're looking at 1800s buildings, and they have these beautiful windows that have all these steps on the sill and all these buck outs. That has nothing to do with looks. I mean, they make them look pretty, but a lot of that is flashing and curves and things that are causing the water to go away from the building. It's actually a lot of really cool. There is a wonderful video I just watched on YouTube about how caulking killed architecture, because you used to have these buildings that were actually designed by form and function that also made them look good because they're supposed to shed water. Now, if you could just caulk a window, who cares that there's a window sill that's sloped and draining it away and all these things. But, if you actually go back to how we used to build, keeping water away from the building and shedding away, there's only 3 places water comes from the outside: from the sky, from the ground, and from the air. And if you can prevent them from coming in those 3 areas, you're doing a great job. And I just built an office in my backyard, and we used exterior insulation. We used furring strip system to where when the siding, right? Those of you guys that know hardy board, that lap siding that goes against it, it's not up against the building. We have these little furring strips that actually keep it like a gap behind it. So if water gets behind that, there's a gap where air exchange can help dry it out, but it can also physically drain down, and we left it open at the bottom to drain out. And so even if my building leaks, it's not a leak if the client ever doesn't see it. As Joe Stieberg says, right? It's not a leak if the client never sees it. And so it's done right. Everything is sloped, right? So whenever we made our little squares in the wall frame to put a window in, we sloped the actual window frame, right? We sloped everything so that way if water does get in that window, it goes out, not in. Everything is flashed properly. And so method is huge. And until we get, exactly like you said, until we get to that point where we're using method and material, harmoniously, we're always going to have these problems at a large level. And then on top of that, we have to deal with materials inside. I mean, when are we ever going to get materials where people are kind of up to date on what is an air quality problem? Why are we still using formaldehyde and stuff? And I don't like the answer because it's the cheapest solution. It's a very cheap solvent and it works incredibly well. It's second best to water, but we can't put water in everything as a solvent. You know what I mean? So we have to use this cheap formaldehyde. And one of the things I'm sure you've noticed way more than I have is the freaking greenwashing.
Oh, yeah.
Right? How do you solve the greenwashing of everyone saying, oh, you have this certificate that their own company made up, or it's green, and they are using green as meaning that it came from some sort of recycled material that they doused in flame retarders. Right. So right. How do you get around the greenwashing labels and stuff? I mean, is there a certification or brand that you like, or how do you do that?
Well, I developed my own certification. This sign here, says health. I actually designed a program years ago called Degree of Green, where we assessed materials based upon, so there's about 27 different reasons why a manufacturer could deem a product to be green, but it boiled down to three main categories: human health, environment health, and sustainability. And so when you walked into a big box store and you asked for, I'm looking for green caulking material. Well, what do you mean by green? And so we would ask the question of our clients, are you looking for products that are human friendly or environmentally friendly? And then we guide them to the right materials, because it's very easy. Look at something you discussed earlier, marmoleum for your floors. Marmoleum is not considered an environmentally friendly product if you are following certain building checklists, because it's all made in the Netherlands. It all comes from Europe. And so it's not made within a certain mile radius of your job site, yet it's made with 100% natural materials, and it's naturally antibacterial, naturally anti-static. So I think what happened at least with our clients is they gravitated towards the human-friendly, human health issues first, and everything else was secondary. And then that means that we have to question all the manufacturers. When pick a product, an insulation says it's eco-friendly. Well, insulation is eco-friendly because it promotes energy efficiency. That's kind of a no-brainer. But if there is formaldehyde in the binder, then it's unhealthy. Now, luckily, all for fiberglass insulation made for residential installation or residential use now is formaldehyde free. So that's a plus. But it's the chase of, again, the unintended consequence of trying to do the right thing. I'll go back to that statement from earlier. Spray foam insulation is very green from a standpoint of energy efficiency. And, from job site production, you can get all this insulation done in a house from some canisters. So it cuts down on shipping costs, and the carbon footprint of the product is a lot less than shipping insulation across the country. So there's all those plus sides. The downside is it's harming the occupants. So if we use that as our focal point on every decision we have to make in a home, If we say it's got to be human friendly first, I believe our homes would look vastly different than they do now. They would look more like we were talking about the way homes were built 50 and 100 years ago. We have to get that back. And the only way that's going to happen is it's not going to happen through legislation. It's not going to happen through codes, because they're the codes right now. There are parts of the country where you can't even build a house without spray foam because their energy codes are so ridiculous. They won't allow for anything else. So they're just saying you can build a home in our county, but it's going to be a toxic house. Sorry. They don't care about the occupants. So it comes down to common sense, and it comes down to us as consumers and you and I and others as professionals to really promote more common sense, and hopefully that starts to take hold.
Well, you might run into the same problem I do, is when you're dealing with contractors that you're consulting with and you're saying, hey, use this product. This is a good product and it's non-toxic. It's an alternative to what you're using. Contractors that have been using the same product for 30 years, they don't like the idea of using a product that they've never used before.
Correct.
I run into this all the time. And especially the painters. Like, I'll work with painters and say, hey, customer is chemically sensitive. Oh, there's a Sherwin-Williams for that. Well, nothing against Sherwin-Williams, but that's not true. And as well as I do, you go into a house and you take a VOC test and it comes back from the lab and you're like, yeah, you have a lot of VOC markers in here. Customers like, we use low VOC or no VOC paint. It's like, yeah, these are the ones that we see in the no VOC paints. These are the ones that show up in those. It's like, wait, there are VOCs that show up in the no VOC paints? It's like, yeah. Yeah.
Well, there's at least 37 unregulated VOCs that the EPA says you don't have to list these. And including acetone and any of those derivatives, ammonia, butyl acetate, trichloroethane. These are commonly found in building materials now because the EPA says you don't have to list them because they're not photocatalytic. They don't create VOCs, they don't create smog when they rise to the upper atmosphere. And I've been preaching this for almost 30 years now. A VOC level has absolutely nothing to do with human health. Completely nothing to do with human health. It is true. Some VOCs are dangerous for humans. It's also true that not only are many VOCs not dangerous for humans, but more importantly, there are thousands of chemicals found in building materials that are not classified as VOCs, but are very, very toxic to the occupants. And so if you're choosing materials based upon VOC content, thinking that you're going to have a healthier home, you will be extremely disappointed when that first test result comes back.
Yeah, Andy, I got this awesome insulation. It's VOC free. It's called asbestos.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, VOC is just a category. It's a volatile organic compound, and it's something that's carbon based. Mm-hmm. That's all it really is. It's just a compound. It's like any other category. You can't say they're all bad. You can't say they're all good. Right. It's like if I said some blanket statement like mammals are all bad. Mammals will all get you. It's like, oh no, there's a difference between a lion and a squirrel. Mm-hmm. And so, it's one of those things. And so this is also why I try to teach people that we teach environmental classes to, the inspectors. You can't always go off that total VOC count when you're doing your VOC tests. You got to know the compounds and you got to know the sources. Right. But yeah, going back to these products, there is a problem with us using these products and saying that they're non-toxic just because they're VOC free. Sure. That doesn't exist. And when you try to get these contractors to alternate to these products that we provide, they are hesitant. But it's crazy. Like this has happened at least a handful of times where I'm telling this contractor, you should really use this paint. It's an alternative that works really well. I've been using this for 30 years. I ain't going to try that. It's like, look, just try it. Customer wants to use this. We get them onto it. And I usually recommend AFM. I love AFM. We use it in our own house. We've used it on all our projects. They make awesome paint. And they're using it. You know what? They come back to me and they're like, oh my God, this paint's amazing. It doesn't drip. I only had to use one coat on this wall, like whatever, right? They love it. And it's like, well, yeah, you know why? Because it's good. They have this thing in their head, like the stuff with the chemicals is better because they're using chemicals. No, they're using those chemicals because they're the cheapest crap that they could put in it. Right. That's all it is. Yep, so exactly. Yeah, you actually find that when you actually go to some of these, not all cases, but a lot of these non-toxic alternatives are better products. They're not just healthier, they're better.
100%. I think it goes back to that question of, is it more expensive to build a healthy home than a traditional home? Again, compare apples to apples, quality level to quality level. The reason why a lot of these healthier products seem to be more expensive than what you're used to is because of the fact that it's a better quality. If you were to
Mm-hmm.
look at some of the best quality paints on the market, I throw up there Benjamin Moore Aura, great quality product. Farrow and Ball, great quality product. Some others that are out there. AFM is up there in price, a little less than the two that I just mentioned, but it's up there. So it's considered a super premium grade paint, super premium
Mm-hmm.
film. You know, with AFM, not only is it a great product, but it's also free of any hazardous air pollutants, any HAPs, and that's something that
Mm-hmm.
we seem to track a lot more than most companies do. You know, companies will track VOCs in order to meet the regulations by the EPA, but they don't have to track HAPs, and HAPs
Right.
are those chemical additives that actually cause cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And you know,
Yeah.
AFM clearly states in all their literature HAP free, and most
Yeah.
companies don't say that. And so, but again, quality level to quality level, you're going to get a better quality product typically when you're buying a healthier material.
Yep. And so here we are in my house. Everything in the house is being chosen in a form and fashion that is good methodology and good material, non-toxic. And the one screw up was this freaking spray foam. Everything else going on inside the house was tight as a button. And now, you know, we actually smelled it. Like I said, thank God we weren't living in here at the beginning. We saw at our old house, but we actually smelled it in the house for the first couple months. You know, like 3 or 4 months, you're walking through the house and you can smell it when you walk in. You're like, oh, it smells like a chemical factory in here. I mean, it was bad. And so it's like above me right now, you know, and I'm like, God, what do we got to do about this? So it's crazy. I appreciate you helping me with it and that conversation we had last week. I'm working on getting one of my friends out on the west side in Tampa to come over with their sandblaster and see what she can do to get this stuff out. I'm also concerned about all the microparticles from the foam flying around everywhere as they break it up. I mean, it's going to be a nightmare mess to clean. And so we're going to have to treat it basically like a mold remediation or an asbestos remediation.
You're going to be using probably, you know, negative air machines. And
negative air, HEPA vacuum, air scrubbers running and all the things just to try to keep it from out of the house while we clean. And then we're going to have to clean the freaking attics. Like once we're all said and done, there's going to be a lot of particle that settles. The air scrubbers aren't going to pick it up all. So it's going to be an attic cleaning process. And then guess what? Now we have to actually put new insulation in, which right now I'm assuming the cost because I don't know who else is going to pay for it. And that's like, I can't sit on this forever, right? So someone's got to pay for it. Someone's got to do it. And it's going to be me. It is a very expensive lesson. I'll tell you that. But it's a good one because I at least saved the last few houses that I've done since I've been dealing with this. Now switching to an alternative method, and my office too. My office is actually done right. It's done with a rock wool insulation on the roof deck, and it's performing incredibly well. Even before any of the insulation came back, I was telling you anywhere from 3 to 7 air changes per hour in Florida is kind of the sweet spot for the code. Anything below 3 requires mechanical ventilation. That one in the back there is at 0.7. We don't have any walls up yet. There's no drywall. It's just all framing, and there's no insulation in, and it's already hitting that score with 0 spray foam. So guys, it can be done. If you're a building scientist listening to this, you can build incredibly high performing places, and you don't need a lick of spray foam.
Well, I am so sorry you and your family are going through this, but I am grateful that you've taken this as a way to educate others, educate other professionals. I think your words will carry a lot of weight with other professionals that I know and listen to the show. You know, I can talk till I'm blue in the face about the toxicity of these building materials, but to have another building scientist actually come out and say, here's what you want to do or here's what you want to avoid, I greatly appreciate that. And so it's unfortunate you had to go through this, but all of us are very grateful that you can share your story.
Of course. Yeah, I'll keep you updated as it goes on.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll let you know the end result.
Brantley, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today. I want to have you back in later on when you conclude this project and we know exactly what has improved.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
All right. We'll talk soon. Thank you.